So I've been a Flesh and Blood YouTuber for almost 4 years now, which means two things. One, I'm an overly obsessed dork. But two, I have a huge collection of little tidbits of knowledge and factoids that I want to talk about in a video, but none of them are substantial enough for their own. So I figured, hey, why not just put them all together in a single video? These are 7 things you probably didn't know about Flesh and Blood. What better way to start a video like this off than with the very first set of cards ever printed for the game, the Ira Welcome Deck. Created in 2018 before the release of Welcome to Rathe and designed specifically for people's very first experience with this game, these had a huge hand in Flesh and Blood's successful start. But did you know that the original 2018 decks, like this one here, are different to the later printings? Looking at both the original and the Crucible of War decks, we can see right off the bat that Ira herself isn't listed as a young hero, meaning she was likely designed before young heroes were even a thing. Next up is the weapon, Edge of Autumn. Not only did the original printing actually explain what Go Again did, whereas the newer one doesn't, but you can also see that the original weapon has a golden border as opposed to the silver border for all future weapons. This was likely a change made in order to save the golden border for gold foils. Moving on from that, we've got a little bit of syntax change on Scar for a Scar. The original says the card gets Go Again if you have lower life than your opponent, but this was later changed to an opposing hero, making the card function in a multiplayer setting. Another noteworthy change is in Brutal Assault, where the original just has a blank text box, but the updated version now has flavor text. However, the biggest and coolest difference between these two decks is the alt art pop art head jabs. While these did come as a set of rainbow foil promos later on, these blue copies are the only non-foil printings of the card, and while they aren't worth a whole lot, it is still a really cool piece of this game's history. Honestly, there's something so charming about these cards, and I really would love to see LSS do a little more pop art with their promos. It looks super clean and makes for some really fun card art. But you know what the coolest thing you could do with these head jabs that you couldn't do with Ira or the rest of her cards? Actually play them in Constructed. Number 2 on this list might surprise you a bit since Ira is such an iconic hero, but did you know that she wasn't actually intended to be playable in any format outside of the Welcome decks? In an article written about a month before Welcome to Rathe's release, both James, the creator of Fab, and Robbie, the creative director, were interviewed about these decks. After being asked if players could expect to see cards from the Ira deck in upcoming sets, James answers, "The Ira deck actually has a high number of unique cards. There's only 2 that made it into the Welcome to Rathe boosters, and 2 more that are included in the Welcome to Rathe hero decks. The other 8, they are unique to Ira. They might one day feature in upcoming sets, but for now, they're only available within the Ira Crimson Haze Welcome deck, which means that they are not tournament legal at this time." Naturally, the next question asked was if Ira herself would be in a retail product, to which Robbie answers, "We designed Ira specifically for this particular experience. Currently, we're not sure if, but maybe if people like her enough, we might consider it, but no, that's not the current plan." So there you have it. I got into this game after Crucible of War, so I had no idea that until that set's release, Ira wasn't actually in the game itself outside of playing 2 Welcome decks against each other. It's actually really crazy to know this now, considering just how popular she ended up being in Blitz when she did finally officially release. But speaking of Blitz, don't you think it's a bit odd that Ira wasn't a young hero originally and she wasn't considered for constructed play despite being a perfect fit for that format? It's almost as if, but no, that couldn't be the case, could it? Coming up as the number 3 thing you probably didn't know, Blitz wasn't intended to be in the game. While it might seem like Blitz has been around forever, it wasn't actually announced until July of 2020, about 9 months after the official launch of the game and a couple months before Crucible of War's release. Until this point, young heroes were designed for limited, and that was it. This would explain why the original printing of Ira in the 2018 Welcome deck doesn't classify her as a young hero, and why she wasn't planned for constructed play since Classic Constructed was all that was planned to exist. However, on July 3rd, 2020, LSS announced the introduction of Blitz, a 52-card format for quick, fun games meant to be a more casual experience than the competitive grind of Classic Constructed. And to say that this format hit the ground running back then would be an understatement. In fact, it's very likely that Blitz is a huge reason that Flesh and Blood is even still around for all of us to enjoy today. I got into Fab in early 2021 when most of the world was still stuck indoors or had hard limits on gatherings. Back then, the only way for most people to play the game was either at home with friends or at armories over over webcam. And no, I'm not joking. For those who weren't around back then, since big parts of the world were locked down to some degree still, it was very common for stores to run their events online and have people pair into chat rooms on Discord. It was a pretty wild time, and I only ever did it a couple times, but Blitz was the format that everyone was playing because not only was it easier and cheaper to build a Blitz deck, especially after the prices of the game went crazy back then, but quicker games were a lot easier to manage over webcam than a typical CC game. So while nowadays it's pretty common for people to hate on Blitz, this format had a huge hand in helping Flesh and Blood ride out the pandemic. I genuinely don't know if any of us would even be here right now if LSS never created the format, so just think about that the next time you shit all over it, would ya? I'm just kidding. Blitz is a total shit show, but we here at Sloopdoop Incorporated love it for it anyways. Coming up as number 4, we have the infamous Alpha Pink Strip error. While we all know the colors of Flesh and Blood being red, yellow, and blue, the original Alpha print run had a color error where the red strips were actually pink. Naturally, this has made these cards very coveted by collectors and players alike, and I myself am very fortunate to have gotten a small collection of these pink strip cards, which I use often. Now, this lovely little printing error is fairly common knowledge, but what you probably didn't know is that there is actually one single Alpha card that doesn't have this printing error. Razor Reflex. As you can see, while the rest of the Alpha Reds are very clearly, well, not red, Razor Reflex has the correct color strip. So how did this happen? Bro, I don't work for the company. I have no idea. Well, that's a lie. I have something of an idea, but I'm not sure if it's true or not. See, while the non-foil copy of Razor Reflex is the same across all sets, the Alpha Rainbow foil is actually a subtle alternate art, with the sword having blood on its edge rather than being clean, which, I think about it, that's probably something else that you might not have known. But my best guess for how Razor Reflex came to be the only actual red strip card in Alpha is that it was maybe printed on a different sheet alongside the alternate art, although again, this is just a guess. Either way, Razor Reflex is a pretty unique card in that it's an anomaly for not being part of the anomaly that was the Alpha Pink Strip error. And while I wish I could say it makes the card cooler, I mean, I'm a sucker for the pink strip cards. That being said, I still think it's really cool that Razor Reflex is not only the game's first alt art rainbow foil, but is also the only card that doesn't share the same infamous printing error as every other Alpha Red card. Moving on to number 5, we got something that is less unique, but way more baffling. Did you know that Ironsong Response used to be unplayable if Reprise wasn't active? So this is a card that I'm sure we all know, as it's been a Dawnblade Dorinthia staple for years, and it's very basic. It's an attack reaction that gives your weapon +3 if the opponent blocked with a card from hand, helping you get up and over for no resource cost. But despite how deadly this card can be, everyone who has played it has probably experienced the exact same situation where you arsenal it, and then your opponent just doesn't block from hand for like 2 to 3 turns. And so sometimes you end up being forced to play it for 0 just to get it out of the arsenal so you can actually put an impactful card there. Now, show of hands, who here has always assumed that you could just play this card for 0? Oh, everyone? Yeah, I figured as much. Well, apparently LSS originally disagreed because in an article released just a few months before I got into the game, they actually had to change the ruling of the card so that you could play it for 0. Listen, this is a super short article, so I'm just gonna read all of it. When Welcome to Wraith was released, we took the position that Ironsong Response could not be played if Reprise was not active. That's fucking wild, dude. We have since come to the realization that this is neither intuitive to players or supportive of design space we want to explore in the future. Effective immediately, Ironsong Response can be played regardless of whether the Reprise effect is active or not. Obviously, if Reprise is not active, Ironsong Response does nothing. However, playing out a card that does nothing may well be the correct play if there is greater value in clearing the arsenal or cards in hand. And this is the exact scenario I was talking about, where sometimes you have to put an Ironsong Response in the arsenal and then it just gets stuck there for too long. Either way, I'm glad that LSS changed the ruling for the card, but it's still fascinating for me to know that there was a time where this couldn't be used in the way that literally everyone would naturally think it could. Again, I've been playing this card like that since I started, and I had no idea that if I had joined Fab just a few months earlier, I would have been cheating. Coming in at number 6 on this little list, did you know that there is a secret hero only referred to a single time in a single article called generics? In a very old article revealing the color cycles of the game, James White mentions the hero saying, "We decided fairly early on that we wanted the baseline defense value of a card to be 3. It then took many games with a prototype box set hero called Generics to be revealed one day in the distant future to work out the power of attacks relative to the cost and pitch value." The article then goes on to explain the design philosophy of the pitch cycles the game uses, but there are no more mentions of Generics, nor could I find any on the rest of the website. So as of right now, there's no way to know who this hero is or if we've even gotten them in the game yet. James said it would be revealed one day in the distant future, and this article was written over 5 years ago now, so this unknown hero could very well be in the game already and we don't even know it. And like, I'm not gonna lie, now that I know this hero is a thing, I really want to know who it is. The fact that it's called Generics makes me wonder if they're a classless hero, or maybe just one that doesn't have many class cards. That could be Genis, and their names aren't too far apart, but I don't know, man. I don't feel like it's him. Again, this hero was mentioned one single time and never again, so there's really no real clues to go off of. I guess we'll just have to wait and hope that maybe in a dev talk or in an interview with James White, he can shed some more light on who this mystery hero is. Last but not least, we have the 7th thing you probably didn't know about Flesh and Blood. Reaping Blade is not an actual sword. See, when new heroes come out, they typically come with an article or two written about them. And while I've read a good number of them, there were some that I missed, and one of those was Viserai's continuation story written for Crucible of War. In it, he's in the Demonastery, disoriented and fighting hordes of beasts, unknowingly setting up a trap laid for him. He ends up captured by cultists, but taps into a new and overwhelming power, breaking free. Grabbing the nearest cultist to him, well, let's just read what the article says, shall we?
With the ether flowing through his veins, Viserai barely needed to flex his fingers. The cultist was decapitated with startling efficiency, his head rolling to a stop at the Arknight's feet. Tearing the spine from the cultist's fresh corpse, Viserai tapped into the newfound connection, drawing on the images playing out in his mind's eye. He cracked the sinewy structure like a whip, channeling ether along its length, watching with morbid fascination as dark material sprouted from the remnants of the cultist's spine. Arcane energy flared from between the vertebrae, forming the basics of a new blade, one of Viserai's own making.
Now, 2 things. Firstly, I just want to point out that the cultist is supposed to be decapitated, but the art shows his head still on, which isn't a big deal, but I felt like pointing it out because I'm a petty asshole. But secondly, bro, this is so fucking metal. I had no idea Viserai straight up Mortal Kombat fatalities a dude and turns his spine into a sword that I've been smacking people with in both Viserai and Florian. But I do have one little nitpick about this. In the final art piece showing the gateway to Irathael being opened, Viserai is holding both the Nebula Blade in one hand and the newly formed Reaping Blade in the other. However, both of these are two-handed weapons. He's not allowed to equip both at once. So not to be that guy, but Judge! Anyways, this was 7 things that you probably didn't know about Flesh and Blood. Although I am curious to know how many things different people actually did know. So in the comments, just tell me how many out of 7 that you actually already knew. And if there's any other interesting little facts about this game that you want to share, please do. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the patrons. If you want to help me make these videos, consider throwing a few bucks my way. Thanks to the GigaChad Saint, Geeks First, Elixir, Vinny, John, Ty, Chemical, Bryant, Dark Memoria, Big Hungry, and Wolf Shadowmancer. Then we got the Alpha Chads Thomas, Zijima, and Aaron. And then there's the Super Chads Thal, Cece, Ben, Yogbadoodles21, Scott, and Kevin. Thanks again as always, and stay Chadly, my friends.